Awareness, the final frontier. These are the explorations of Jonathan Robinson and Brian Tom O'Connor. Their continuing mission, to discover fresh new paths to the mystery within, to seek out new joys and new methods of awakening, to boldly go into the heart of expanded consciousness. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, friends and fellow explorers. This is Jonathan Robinson, and I'm here with my co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
I love how that sounds. For one thing, you have that deep, resonant voice that sounds wise. You could say, talk about the weather, Brian, and I think it would sound profound. I actually have to say profound things to sound profound, but you have a head start, I think.
Well, I can try it right now. Today's weather. Light, gradually turning dark towards evening.
Yes. And in fact, that's sometimes the internal weather that people have. If it's light, the bad news is it's probably going to grow dark at some point. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, which is letting go of difficult emotions. But before we go into the darkness, let's talk about our last episode, where we talked really about 3 approaches to letting go, which were, say, letting go of physical tension, letting go of mental tension, and letting go of spiritual attachment.
Sure.
I like how in our explorations, Brian, we kind of complement each other in that I'll have information on one thing and then you'll have it on another. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about our last episode where we talked about those things.
Well, I enjoyed that episode a lot. In fact, immediately after it was over, I thought, oh, that was a good one. But my next thought was, we really just scratched the surface. There's so much to letting go, and there's so much in particular to letting go of our so-called negative emotions, that I think it's great that we're going into it more today.
Yeah, and negative emotions, there's a whole range of negative emotions. There's the negative emotions of, somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you feel a little bit flash of anger, or the negative emotion of your computer's taking a while to boot up, little uncomfortable things. And then there's all the big negative emotions. You get sick, or somebody else gets sick, or political party does something you don't like. So there's everything from little things which happen literally 100 times a day to the big things. But I think the good news is that once you learn how to let go, you get to use those methods maybe on all of them from little to big, and you get better at it with practice.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, all the emotions are reminders that happen throughout your day. I use them even particularly the small annoyances. I ride the subway and somebody blocks the door or something like that. And I just use that moment of annoyance as a reminder to look at the background of awareness that it's appearing in. And they're really helpful. But of course, it's easier to practice on the little ones, the less important emotions. And then gradually, you can apply these techniques that we're talking about over the course of all these podcasts to more and more difficult emotions.
With difficult emotions, that's when life really grabs us by the throat and gets our attention. So people tend to then go to their best way of dealing with things. But you're right that it's much better to practice these with the little things, because it's easier to digest them. It's easier to use the techniques when you're not overwhelmed. The problem is that life hasn't fully gotten your attention. We tend to go towards, well, it's going to be over soon, so I don't have to do anything. And I know that, like, I tend to have reminders, Post-it notes or things where it says, remember to use that tool for the day on the little thing. And it also helps to have friends who will remind you, people like you, when our internet connection's not working, remember the background of awareness. I want to slap you when you say that, but it does help me to remember to practice what I preach. And I'm wondering if you have ways to remind yourself, or does it come automatically at this point?
Well, sometimes it does come automatically because I've done it so much, but I still use reminders and I find them incredibly helpful. And some of them are surprising reminders. Like, I live in an apartment building with long hallways, and always going to office buildings with hallways. And one of them is just simply walking down a hallway because there isn't a lot of information or activity other than walking down the hallway. And I use that as a trigger to remind myself to imagine that this experience of walking down this hallway is happening in the field of awareness. And some other things are when I walk into a bookstore, or when I have an interaction with someone, even if it's just a checkout person at a store. I use these as little reminders to experience it from awareness. And then these encounters become more joyful, more playful, more pleasant. But I also liked what you said about friends. And it reminds me of something that I don't know if we told our listeners about. Before we started this podcast, you and I would have a weekly talk on Skype. You're in California, I'm in New York, and we would talk and we would just share our thoughts about awareness and share our techniques and talk about them. And I found it so useful because there would always be a take that you would have that I hadn't thought of, and vice versa. And we loved talking to each other and helping each other out. And it was so helpful that we decided, hey, let's share it with others.
Yeah, and I think that one of the values of this podcast is that hopefully the people listening feel part of that family, and they can ask questions on our website, awarenessexplorers.com, or invite other people. So if you have other friends who are listening to the podcast, you can talk to them about it, because what you focus on grows. So if you focus on awareness, or you focus on it with friends, it tends to become a bigger part of your life. And the good thing about awareness is, if you are focusing on the background of awareness, you will definitely have peace, because there's no way to focus on the background of awareness and experience that without significantly impacting the amount of peace in your life. So, if you focus on money, well, money might bring you more peace. It might bring you more heartache. It might bring you more difficulty, but we could call this guaranteed peace, and having helpers in whatever form is a really important part of that.
Yeah, and it's true that it is guaranteed peace, because the more you do it, and it probably might take each person a little while to get the hang of it, but once you've experienced it a few times, once you've seen that field of awareness is peace itself, and it's already there, that you don't have to generate peace, you just have to notice that there's a peace that's already there that's allowing everything to be, then it's just you start to get the feel of it, you start to get the hang of it, and it just becomes easier and easier.
So well said. Yeah. Once you know where the target is, you don't have to throw things in random directions. It's always in a certain direction.
Yeah, that's right. And even better than that, the target starts to attract, so that actually, because you've been there and because you know what it feels like, it starts to draw you to it in very subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways.
I like how you say it, because I tend to think that I have to generate stuff, or I have to be the active force. But another way of looking at awareness is that it's already a magnet, and we're actively trying to avoid it.
Right.
And doing it quite successfully, I might add. I'm very good at successfully avoiding the call of awareness, but you start to be less active in that avoidance, and resting in the magnet that's already pulling you towards now and the container of which all our impressions are within.
That's true. And in fact, one of the very early tastes that I ever had of this kind of happy for no reason feeling was listening to a teacher suggest, what would it be like if you had no intention right now?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried it. Let's see, what if I had no intention? Of course, I started laughing because I thought, well, isn't deciding to have no intention an intention? And that was funny. But even past that, just the idea that I could drop trying to get something, trying to make something happen, that very sort of attitude or stance is what allows pure awareness to attract us to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're not so busy doing something, it's what's left.
That's right.
So, speaking of doing things, we have a subject which is what to do about these uncomfortable or big or small negative emotions that every once in a blue moon pass our screen of awareness. Every once in a blue moon or every other second, whichever one you might happen to experience. So I thought it would be interesting to start with a distinction, and that is that if you picture a continuum of what to do with negative emotions, on one end of the continuum could be called positive thinking or trying to change or shift your focus so that the negative emotion is not so prominent. And this is really what society teaches us mostly. And it's even what self-help teaches us. You know, watching TV, play some music, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of which I have used plentiful. And then in the self-development form, it's kind of like change your focus by maybe asking a different question or framing something. What could be good about this situation that sucks so badly? I don't want to make fun of it. I've written books about that, and I think that those can be really useful techniques so that you are getting unstuck.
Yes.
But the opposite end of the spectrum is diving into negative emotions or uncomfortable emotions, which sounds at first like, somebody throws you a punch that you lean into it. But I'd like you to talk about why that's a valuable approach as well, especially for becoming aware of awareness.
Sure. Well, it's true that eventually we have to feel our feelings. And one of the things that blocks the experience of pure awareness is the strategies that we devise to prevent us from feeling something. We have a negative feeling. We don't want to feel it. We think of ways to get rid of it. We think of ways to change it. And a lot of this involves excessive thinking and rumination and spinning the thought in our mind and thinking, well, what's wrong with me that this happened? What's wrong with the other person that caused me to feel this way? What can I do so this feeling never comes back? And that's all counterproductive. That all masks the awareness that has already allowed that emotion to be there and is already okay with it. And the other thing is that when we concentrate on our thoughts and ideas about the emotion, it's very easy to forget that emotions actually are physical. They are chemical reactions in the body. And when we spend all our time in our head about the emotions, we're not experiencing them in the body. And when we relax the body, when we let go of the clutching that naturally happens to guard us against the emotion, then the emotion doesn't spin around inside and get stuck there. It actually comes in, we experience it, we feel it, and it moves on out.
Which is really what every 2-year-old does. And if you're seeing like a 2-year-old have a tantrum, they go into the emotion fully, and then 30 seconds later, they're fine. Now their parents are wigged out for a while, but they seem to be okay. And that seems to be our natural birthright, is to experience our feelings real intensely, and then they naturally let go.
Right. It's the strategies that we employ to try to prevent the emotion that actually cause them to stick around.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and we have a slightly different feeling about this. You're somebody who tends towards the side of the spectrum of dive in to the emotions, and I think that that is one valid approach. I've written many books about the changing your focus. What's good about this? What are you grateful for in your life, etc. I think they both had their place at different times and with different people. Sometimes I've seen that if people go into their negative emotions, they get stuck that way and they wallow in self-pity and they wallow in depression, and it doesn't look like they ever come out the other end. To those people, you might do like cognitive therapy, like changing your thoughts or changing your focus. But then there's people who just refuse to actually allow what's there to be there and feel their emotions. And they're using psychology as a defense that keeps them from this doorway into a bigger, more expanded world. So you have to kind of know what works for you and what maybe you use incorrectly as a defense from getting to your next step. What do you think of that?
Yes, actually, we're not quite as far apart on that as we might think. I agree that a lot of it has to do with the timing. For example, deep dive into emotion. I don't use that all the time every day. I might do that once every month or two when I feel that things are building up because of circumstances or because I've been resisting something. And I'll just sit down and take an hour and bring up the feeling, relax all resistance to the feeling, bring it up and feel it as fully as possible, and then let it move through me. But I don't do that every day, all day long. Sometimes for the little emotions, I just will try another technique. For example, stop thinking about
Yeah.
it. Because when you stop thinking about it, oddly enough, there is a kind of a natural sort of emotional immune system that will really heal it automatically when you're not sort of keeping it going, recreating it with the thoughts. It's like picking at a scab. If you stop
Yeah.
picking at it, it eventually will heal.
So that's a good point. That's towards the end of the spectrum of changing your focus. And then there's the deep dive. And I agree that I don't use the deep dive very often, but when I do, it's very powerful. It like clears out the pipes in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do it, I try to get really into the physical sensations separate from my story. 'Cause I always have a poor me story, some sob story going on. But if you separate the story from what actually is manifesting in your body as sensations, you can like go really deep into those sensations. And by going very deeply into those sensations, you find that they're always changing. And as you allow them to be there and open into them, it kind of becomes like a portal to a deeper sense of now. And eventually, it's like a wormhole where you get through it and you're then clear, like, wow, I feel lighter. I feel like something was birthed through me and it went through the birth canal. And now it's out.
That's excellent. And I think it's so important that I really want to back you up and underscore that, because it's such an important thing that we forget very often. And it's a key technique that you feel the emotion in the body, almost as an abstract sensation apart from the narrative, apart from the story about it. I think it's really key, and I think you described that process really well.
Yeah, well, good. I think we're on the same page there. And so there's the deep dive. There's the shifting focus. There's what we talked about last time in the last the Art of Letting Go podcast, which was just allowing what's there to be there,
Mm-hmm.
and just not resisting it. And the allowing just kind of hastens it to not get stuck.
Yeah.
So that's another approach. But one of the things that we're looking to do in this session is to talk about a whole new approach that really I've never read before until I read your book, Awareness Games, which was, I guess you call it the include method.
Yes.
And when I read this method, I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And then I did it. And I said, oh my gosh, this is incredibly profound. Everybody should know about this. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about the include method and then maybe guide us in a include guided meditation.
Sure. Yeah, the include method is sort of partway between diving into the emotion and on the one hand and allowing the emotion to be on the other hand, or finding other things to focus on. And it's based on the idea that when an emotion takes over, it really is trying to grab our attention. It really is greedy for our attention, and it wants to be the only thing we think about. It's like it puts itself right in our faces so it seems huge and it blocks out everything else. But it's just simply not the only thing going on. And when we...
just to interrupt you there, I read the other day that we can consciously be aware of 50 things.
Wow.
Now or 50 things are registering in somehow of our awareness. We actually can be consciously aware of about 5 things, but that our subconscious can be aware of 50 million things. Like we're digesting food, we're doing all these bodily things all the time, which are way too many to count, but we're not aware of any of these things. So there's 50 million things our body's doing every second. There's 50 things that we could be aware of in some way. And then we tend to be consciously aware of 5, and probably 4 of them have to do with things that we're upset about.
That's right. And the amazing thing is that all of those things are appearing in the same place, or the same space, or the same field.
So the include method is really expanding the amount of things that people are aware of. So it's not just 3, 4, or 5 things, most of which are negative. And you expand them until you also include the background of awareness, so that you're not filtering the way our mind normally filters. You're actually relaxing the filter until you are totally open, and open to the place where even being aware of awareness becomes obvious.
Exactly. And that so-called negative emotion shifts its proportion to your entire attention, so that it actually shrinks proportionally to something that fills up your entire consciousness, to something that's really just a small percentage of everything that's happening. And therefore, it kind of loses a lot of its pull, a lot of its destructive power.
Yeah, in my seminars, I may have mentioned this once before, but I put a black dot on a whiteboard, black dot about the size of a dime.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, imagine that this is your biggest problem or uncomfortable emotion. We have a relationship with that problem or uncomfortable emotion. And for a lot of people, their relationship with it is they put their eyeball directly on it, on top of it. And then from that perspective, they're saying, it looks black. It looks dark as far as I can see, because from an eighth of an inch away, that's all you see. But if you walk across the room, it looks like a small dot on a whiteboard. And you go, oh, well, that's not a big thing. So the include method helps you to step back from that problem or that black dot and helps you to see that it's surrounded by other things until eventually you see that you are the whiteboard, you are the background.
That's the progression from the all-pervasive dot to the all-inclusive clear field of the white background.
So why don't you guide people in this magical method that we've been talking about? And once again, it's really the third way of, it's not shifting focus, it's not deep diving, it's a whole new approach. I think, 100 years from now, they'll call it the Brian O'Connor include method, because it really is a new approach that I hadn't come across, that when you get the hang of it, is very profound and can be literally done in under a minute. Sometimes, I'll just take 30 seconds and I'll include new things until I'm back to awareness. But if you do it in like a 5-minute guided meditation, I think people will get a sense of what you're doing, and hopefully then they'll be able to make it their own.
That's right. I hope so. So I'll walk you through the include game. I call it the game for tough emotions, but it can actually be used for anything that wants to hog all your attention. So as with all our games, exercises, and methods, just take a nice, slow, deep breath and see if there's any tension in your body, anything that's clutching or holding on. And first I'll talk a little bit about how and why include works, and then I'll walk you through the steps. So sometimes these painful emotions, they wash over you. They demand your attention. It's like an alarm clock. It's like a siren or an alarm clock that won't go off. They pull your focus in and they narrow your focus down. And it's as if they're trying to say, deal with me. Don't think of anything else. Fix this. Fix me. Change this. So naturally, when this happens, it's sometimes a little tough to shift your focus to the awareness of the emotion. Because every time you try to shift to awareness, the thoughts about the emotional situation pull you back. I sometimes use the image of trying to open a spring-loaded trap. And you open it and it keeps snapping shut. So watch out for that. Notice when that happens to you. And when it does, try these steps. Just for a few seconds, don't try to fix it. Don't try to make it go away. Just acknowledge that it's here. Allow it to be here, just for now. Then imagine that the emotion is showing up in awareness. In other words, there's the emotion, and there's awareness of the emotion. And the next step is to include more. Ask yourself, what else is in awareness other than this unwanted feeling? Let's see, there are sounds. There's the sound of traffic outside, or the fan, or birds, or a voice or your breathing. If your eyes are open, there are sights. There are objects in the room around you there's light bouncing off them and coming in. They're appearing in awareness too. There's bodily sensations. Right, what is my body feeling right now? What sensations are appearing in awareness? There's the feeling of my body against the chair I'm sitting in, or my feet against the floor or the ground. Maybe a breeze on my skin, or rumbling of my stomach, or my heartbeat. These are all body sensations, and they're appearing in awareness. And there are thoughts. They pop into your head. They come and go. So include them. The thoughts are appearing in awareness. The sounds are appearing in awareness. The sights are appearing in awareness. The body sensations are appearing in awareness. Include them. Include even more. Include, include, include. Expand awareness until it includes every possible thing. And just let it grow and include more. Anything that you can notice, anything that you can think of, anything you can feel, anything you can perceive, anything you can know about is happening in the same field of awareness. Until you notice that any feeling isn't the only thing that's going on right now, although it wants you to believe it is. So you don't fight it. You don't try to change it. You just include everything else that goes along with it. And include more. The more the merrier. And that's the include, include, include game.
I feel like I just expanded into the cosmos.
I know, sometimes I feel like I'm a Thanksgiving Day balloon floating off above Central Park West.
Yes, yes. I've taken some serious illegal drugs that don't work quite as well as that.
Haven't we all?
Yes, yes. So that's I'm surprised that's still legal, Brian.
Well, we'll have to do something about that.
Yeah, I'm sure they will eventually. So in the short period of time that the include meditation is still legal in most states, make sure you do it, because it's really good stuff. And I love how gentle it is. You know, you're not resisting anything.
Right.
You're just being more and more inclusive. And in a certain way, you're aligning with reality. Normally, we're resisting reality. And all you're really doing is just stopping all the bullshit you normally do. And you're just allowing to realign with what is all the things going on. And that's why it feels so good.
That's right. And I think that's very perceptive. You are aligning with reality. And one of the reasons you are is because you're really focusing on what's happening right now. Everything in that game is all about right now, right here, this moment. It's not about the past. It's not about the future. And it's allowing what is. And when you do align with reality, what happens is you start vibrating in the same frequency as the universe. And things start to become easier and feel more natural.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can definitely feel that. So many good ideas. I hope if you didn't catch them all, you'll even listen to it again or share it with friends so that you can talk about it amongst yourself, us, our fellow exploring club out there. And practice. Try different stuff. See what works for you. Everybody's a little bit different. So maybe write it down on your to-do list. You'll do an include meditation. And when you find something that really works for you, you have a friend for life. So it's worth the exploration. And thanks so much for being part of our Explorers Club. I feel like we're really on the cutting edge, discovering new worlds. And it's great fun to be able to do this with you, Brian.
Oh, it's fun to do it with you too, Jonathan. Thank you.
Okay. Until next time, friends, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.